Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Good day for everyone. Thank you for joining us in this webinar. Uh, Va a ser en español y en inglés. It's going to be in Spanish and English. I will make a comment about that in the next slide. So let's go to do some housekeeping issues. There's going to be interpretation. Please check the world icon at the bottom right. And so you can choose your language. Elijan el icono del mundo en la parte inferior derecha para la traducción usando el idioma de su preferencia. Los micrófonos están apagados. The microphones are off. And si quieren poner preguntas para la sesión de preguntas y respuestas, por favor, publíquenlas en español o en inglés, no hay problema, utilizando el icono en la parte inferior de la pantalla. If you want to put some questions, please do that in the Q&A section, not in the chat. Okay? So let's continue. This is a brief comment on what Arpel is doing, right? We have a mission of promoting the integration, operational excellence, and sustainable development of the oil and gas and renewable energy industry in the region through the cooperation among members and collaboration with its main stakeholders. The reason why I highlighted some parts in yellow are those aspects that are more related to to, to the work that we are going to be presenting here and the future steps as will be presented by the speaker. The value proposition of Arpel, in a nutshell, is very simple. We provide a forum for the exchange of knowledge and experiences, and that is what we are doing in this webinar. We have direct relationship with governments. We are the only regional link between international and national business associations, which is an effective ways of transferring knowledge worldwide to the national level for national stakeholders engagement. And of course, we are driving and supporting our member companies' initiatives in adapting to the new business scenario related to the energy transition. Now, how we accomplish this? We developed several activities, services, and deliverables. We have courses, workshops, reciprocal assistance among our member companies, implementation of good practice guides, either developed by our PEL or by other associations. We develop manuals, white papers, as the one we are going to be presenting here. We do benchmarking, non-competitive issues, studies reports, executive reports. We have a PEL conference every 2 years. Last year we had in Colombia. Next year it's going to be in Buenos Aires. We provide good government industry forums. We, of course, do stakeholders engagement, and we have a strong network with trade and professional associations. And by doing all that, we try to develop the value of Arpel. The Arpel member companies at present are the ones that you can find here. They are either operators, private or state-owned companies, or they are also service providers of the oil and gas industry value chain. But that's not the only way we interact with the industry. We have a strong network, as I mentioned, of institutions. Some of them are trade associations, some national, some internationals, and some others are professional associations. All of them, all the work they do, or the work we do, is a good synergy, because the idea is to expand not only the knowledge by contacting or networking with these associations and working jointly with them, but also provides a better outreach of the outputs that we deliver. So without further ado, let's start with a webinar that will present the key findings of our PERPS report on operational and regulatory considerations for the efficient use of dispersants to combat oil spills, the April 25 edition. With an overview, this document has an overview of key regulatory requirements regarding the pre-approval and field authorization of dispersants in several countries of the Americas, as well as operational considerations requiring advanced planning. I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Victoria Broje. Dr. Broje works for Shell, an Alpel member company, and is the principal emergency management specialist on environment. She is an international recognized expert with 25 years of experience in environmental science and emergency response. She supports Shell businesses worldwide as a principal technical expert in spill response technologies, research and development, regulatory and public outreach, and environmental impact assessments. Dr. Broje participates in developing best industry practices in emergency response and environmental protection, working through several national and international trade associations. She engages with government agencies of several countries to improve environmental regulations around emergency response. She's also the leader of the Alpel Dispersants Task Force, the group of professionals from Alpel member companies in charge of developing the reports that we are about to present. It is worth noting that we have had 400 registrations from around the world for this webinar, reflecting the importance of this topic. So without further ado, I will leave the floor or the screen to Victoria, please.
Thank you, Miguel. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for joining this webinar where we will discuss challenges and opportunities for improving regulatory and operational aspects of dispersants use in Americas. And I'm giving this presentation as a lead for Alpel Dispersants Task Force. So industry and government both put a lot of efforts into spill prevention, but of course we have to be ready to respond should a spill take place. And in case of offshore spills, every effort should be made to collect or treat oil offshore and prevent it from coming into sensitive nearshore or shoreline areas where it can cause significant environmental and social-economic damage. And if we want to treat a lot of oil offshore, dispersants use at the surface or subsea can be one of the most effective response tools, and often it can be the only feasible response tool. Dispersants operations are not easy to put together. They require regulatory approvals and a lot of operational considerations and planning. Since oil is spreading so fast at sea, and it's also changing its properties quickly, making it not dispersible over time, we have a very limited window of opportunity to consider different factors, advantages and disadvantages of dispersants use, and make decisions and conduct operations to make sure we treat oil, as much oil as possible. So these discussions really should be held prior to a spill and not during the spill, because otherwise there may be some delays in operations. So you will hear a lot in my presentation about timing on decision making and preventing delays, because any delay in application of response technique result in unnecessary additional environmental and socioeconomic impact. We also will talk about the volumes of dispersants that may be available. It's not just important to know what dispersants are approved, but whether they exist in the world, in global stockpiles, in sufficient quantities. Because if you only have small volume of dispersants available, you can only treat a very small oil spill before you run out. And manufacturing of dispersants, it's not something that can be done quickly, and it may be delayed by a couple of months to produce sufficient quantities at the time of the spill. So these are some of the important considerations that we will talk about. We will not discuss topics related to toxicity of dispersants or details of field applications. They are covered in many other guides, including Alpel Dispersants Guide and also newest guide from IMO that you can download online for free and learn all these technical details. What we are going to talk about today is specifically on regulatory and operational aspects of operations in US, Canada, and Latin American countries, with emphasis on those that may cause potential delays in response or limit volume of dispersants available. We developed a list of critical criteria and assessment methodology for them, and we want to identify opportunities for improvement and promote discussion and collaboration between all stakeholders, because many countries had decades of experience with dispersants, and there is a lot of good information that can be shared across the region. When we decided on this study, we developed a survey of more than 50 questions on every aspect that we thought would be important to understand in order to put together an efficient dispersant operation. And we sent this survey to our member companies and partner organizations, and they provide us with their responses. Here you can see countries that participated in this study. We covered 18 countries, plus Panama had 2 plans, one national plan and one separate for Panama Canal. So you will see 19 areas covered. And we hope that this report will be evergreen, and we will update it because countries change their regulations, and we want to reflect the most recent situation. We also ask you to please let us know if you see any errors in our report so that we can correct it in the next year's edition. And you can see email address that you can send your comments to, and we will very much appreciate your contribution. In the report, you will see that we divided considerations into regulatory and operational. Regulatory is something that is owned by agencies, and operational is something that is owned and need to be enabled by operators. So here we would look at a national contingency plan. Does it talk about dispersants? Is decision-making process for dispersants approval is clear? Are all agencies identified? And what I want to emphasize on this slide is that terminology for pre-approval and pre-authorization sometimes gets blurred or used interchangeably. But for this report, we want to very clearly distinguish between them. What we are going to call pre-approval is testing and registering of dispersants on the list of approved substances in the country. It does not mean that you can use these dispersants. It just means that you cannot use anything else that's not listed. And then at the time of the spill, we would apply to a separate approval, and often to different agencies, to request opportunity to apply these dispersants in the field in a specific situation. So it's very important to see this distinction. Pre-approvals, it's preliminary testing, and authorization, it's for use in the field at the time of the spill. And of course, dispersant operation takes a lot of logistics and preparation, and we didn't look at every single component of it, and some of them are individual to companies and countries, but we wanted to highlight few that may need to be addressed at the time of planning, because if they're not addressed in advance, then they may cause delay in approval or implementation of this technique in the field. And some of these important topics are net environmental benefit analysis or spill impact mitigation assessment documents. Several countries require one of these documents in order to give approval. So they take time to prepare, and if you don't have them in advance, there may be some delays in preparing and processing these documents. Also, there may be some monitoring requirements. So if you have equipment that needs to be brought into country, that needs to be thought through, and as well as where the rest of dispersant resources are coming from. So on next two slides, I would like to stop and discuss in a little bit more details because they have technical information. I mentioned 50 questions that we asked, and that's a lot of information for 19 countries. It's very difficult to distill it in an easily digestible overview or highlight important topics. So what we did, we distilled them to 14 questions that we felt would be most descriptive of situation in each of the country and help us identify whether situation as we assess it is acceptable and efficient, or there may be some challenges that may need to be addressed. And I will go through the questions in a second, but we also introduced this color code just to highlight and compare different countries. And of course, it's subjective, but we here explain you why we chose certain colors for different questions because they are not the same. So for example, if a country has dispersant use policy described in contingency plan, it's great. And we marked it as green. And of course, if no, then we mark it as orange. And clear procedures for pre-approval, again, registration of dispersants are in place or not, that is useful to know. And whether agency is known or that does it. So these are pretty straightforward questions. And where it becomes a little bit more tricky is whether you have enough available dispersant stockpile. So here we are assessing how many dispersants you approve as a country. For example, Canada only approved one dispersant, and it's Corexit. And those of you that are in this field know that the Corexit manufacturer, Champion X, have exited the market. They are no longer going to manufacture these dispersants and no longer are going to license them. So in this case, over the years, the existing licenses and registrations in countries will lapse, and we no longer will be using Corexit, and you cannot really manufacture it anymore. So this put this country into a kind of dangerous situation by not having dispersants capabilities going forward. So we definitely want to make sure that countries understand how many dispersants they approve, but also are they actually available in global stockpiles. So if we see only one dispersant approved, or if this dispersant is actually not available or will become unavailable, maybe we give it orange colored as something that may need additional attention. And also some countries prefer to test it in-house and some other countries prefer to rely on other registrations from other countries, like for example, France or UK or US. So they let them do all the heavy lifting and they just accept whichever dispersants were studied there. So usually it just expands number of dispersants you can get access to without putting a burden on agencies to test it all the time. And topic of expiration and renewal became very important with this Corexit situation, because up till now in United States, most of our dispersant stockpile was composed of Corexit. Right now, Environmental Protection Agency in the US is going to remove all approvals from existing dispersants in December of this year. So it means that going forward, Corexit will not be registered because manufacturer is not available. And it means that all these efforts that industry and government put into preparedness will be negated by this action. So it's very important to understand how often expiration happens for approved dispersants and what can be done to monitor the situation and make sure that it doesn't disappear completely. And also it's important who can apply for approvals. In case of US, only a manufacturer can apply, and since manufacturer is no longer willing or able to register, now we have no ability to use Corexit going forward, which is really unfortunate. But some other countries allow operator or stockpile holder to reapply and re-register this dispersant, providing greater security and confidence in ability to use these stockpiles. So these are some of the topics that we felt important for this block of approval of dispersants that can be considered in country. The next block talks about authorization at the time of the spill. And of course, if there's a clarity on who authorizes the dispersants and if the process is efficient, it's great and gets green color. But if maybe there are too many agencies and it's not clear how they interact and there may be potential delay in decision making, then we would give it orange or yellow. Some countries discuss in their regulations how to apply for approval for both surface and subsea dispersants, and some only talk about surface dispersants. So it's not very clear how to get approval for subsea. So it would be good to get better clarity. And then in some countries, once you have contingency plan approved with dispersants use mentioned for these scenarios, it constitutes as an approval to use it in these scenarios should they manifest in the field, eliminating unnecessary deliberation at the time of the spill and allowing regulators to ask all the questions they need before spill happens and get all these answers documented. Also, in some countries, like for example, United States, there are pre-authorized zones established where dispersants can be used without further approval and deliberation. So most offshore waters in the United States, 3 miles away from shore, are approved, are pre-authorized for surface application of dispersants with some criteria. So these type of policies ensure that there is no necessarily delay and deliberation for situation when dispersants can clearly benefit spill response. And some countries also have specific areas where they do not allow dispersants use. For example, over marine sanctuaries or other important fishing areas. And there is no orange color because if they didn't identify these exclusion zones, it's okay, we can still use dispersants. It's not going to prevent efficient dispersants use. If they did identify it, it's good because it just helps them and operators to know where dispersants should be used and where not. And the last topic is also very important because there is no country that can have enough dispersants just to treat every situation, especially large loss of well control spill. And it doesn't make sense for each country to have these individual large stockpiles because they expire over time and you need to replace them. And as a result, globally, organizations like OSRL, they keep a strategically placed stockpile of very well studied and accepted dispersants, so then they can be brought into a country that needs them. But it has to be evaluated whether there is an efficient process in a country to bring foreign resources and especially chemicals, equipment, and people that may be needed for operation. So this is probably the most important and interesting slide that I would like to walk you through, and you can see more details in our report. But by distilling our 50 questions to 14 and assigning them this initial indication color code, it allows us to show you kind of a general situation in different countries. So it looks like there is policy in most of countries covering dispersants, which is great. There are some opportunities for improvements in Guatemala. And in most countries do have clear procedures about how dispersants will be added to this list of approved substances, again, with some opportunities for improvement. And agency is known. And typically when you start working in a country and you ask how the situation with dispersants is, and folks can tell you that yes, there is an agency in place and there is a policy in place for both pre-approval and pre-authorization, and it seems okay till you start looking at details. And that's what we invite everybody to do with this report, is not just take things for granted that there is policy in place, but have a critical kind of a view and make sure that it really works as intended. As I mentioned, there is a kind of across the board potential concern that countries may not have sufficient dispersants because either like Canada, they approve only one dispersant, or maybe like in Argentina, there are a couple of dispersants approved, but only one of them is available from global stockpile, Corexit. And if it goes away, maybe there will be a challenge with getting sufficient volumes. So this topic seems to be important for all countries. And some countries do accept test results from others. Some others, like for example, US, absolutely conducts their own, which is okay. And this is where it's important not just to take these colors for granted, but really look at details. Because, for example, Mexico allows dispersants approved in US. But as I mentioned, in US, as of this December, they're going to remove all previously approved dispersants, and only 3 new formulas have been licensed as of now and will be added to this list. But none of these 3 new formulas are available from global dispersant stockpile. There will be some of them manufactured for US use only because of our regulatory regime here. But it means that potentially, if we read this regulation correctly, if Mexico relies on US approvals, then in January of next year, they will have no ability to use dispersants because there is none available in the global dispersant stockpile. And it also kind of eliminates opportunity to use existing dispersant stockpile because US decided to expire past registration. So if you are working in a country that relies on others, it's important to monitor what happens in those other countries, not to find yourself in this situation. We also need to understand how often this registration and pre-approvals are expiring in countries. Because, for example, in Brazil, I believe, they may expire every couple of years, and they're expecting manufacturers to reapply to continue with having this capability. The issue is that if this expiration come to end, and then manufacturers decide not to apply, like it will happen with Champion X and Corexit, then you have no capability. And I think there was even several months in Brazil when there was no dispersants approved, which really limits our ability to respond to oil spills, and that's not a prudent situation to be in. And also it's important, as I mentioned, to understand who can apply for registration. Yes, for example, in Argentina, there may be a challenge with dispersant volume access, but they allow operators and other entities other than manufacturer to apply. So Argentina could maintain their ability to use Corexit going forward if there was a stockpile available. And also Canada doesn't have expiration timeline on their approval. So if you have stockpile, you could use it for as long as it's usable. So it's important to see it in context. But in countries like I mentioned, Brazil, if there is frequent expirations and only manufacturers can register dispersants and tests from other countries are not accepted, and potentially limited access to additional dispersants, this is where it may present challenge. So we should see these responses kind of in context of each other. Now we are going to talk about the approval for the time of the spill. So we talk about this authorization. There are agencies that are identified who would approve dispersants at the time of the spill, but maybe in some countries there are too many agencies that are involved, or there is not clarity of how efficiently they can do it. So we highlighted those. And several countries have not kind of gotten an opportunity to update their regulation to include subsidies percent injection. So this is something that we recommend countries to look into to make sure that there is no unnecessary delays in approving subsidies persons. Very few countries approve contingency plan as authorization for future use in the field. And also they may not have pre-authorized zones. It means that in these countries, you have to apply for use of dispersants at every situation. And in these countries where there's also questions about the efficiency of their policies, this is an opportunity for operators to work with regulators to better understand how we can streamline this process, what information can be offered beforehand to make sure that this process is efficient. We also have to keep in mind that in this rapidly changing environment we live in, the personnel in agencies and in industry may be changing rapidly. So some countries that, for example, require NIBA or CIMA as approvals, there may be some personnel that's not as familiar with this topic as others, and there may be some delays in confusion of what to do with that. So there is a lot of opportunity for collaboration between countries, and definitely looking at transboundary resource movements and bringing stockpiles, personnel and resources from other countries. So again, we have used somewhat subjective criteria, but our goal was to highlight for you some of the topics that you may not have looked at previously, but something that may be very important for your operations and your readiness if you are a regulator in a country. And if the topic of authorization at the time of the spill was kind of known and operators and regulators were working to improve, this topic of having dispersants approved, maintaining these approvals, and having access to sufficient volumes of dispersants. This is something that really was not that well understood. And with the example of Corexit situation in the US really highlighted how when you put all the cards in the hands of manufacturers and they can withdraw their production or approvals at any given moment, how vulnerable we could be. And it stresses the importance of preparedness and collaborating between industry and government to make sure that all our efforts are not negated. And we do need to make sure that we can respond to an oil spill as fast as we can, efficient as we can, and be able to process substantial information quickly to make sure that we are making the right decision. So another way to process the results that we got is to sort them by kind of how many green versus red areas we identified. So it shows you opportunities for further discussion and maybe potential improvements in individual countries. So that is certainly helpful. And what we could also do with results is to arrange them by topics. Which topics do we see that are important and may present challenge across the board for many different countries? And this offers us an opportunity to maybe identify best practices, identify additional information, and share it so no country is left to bear consequences of an oil spill if they cannot respond to it quickly. And you can see here that some of the top topics that came up in this survey is this availability of sufficient volumes of approved dispersants and how often they expire and who can apply to renew these registrations, as well as the topic of authorization in the field and whether there are pre-authorized zones or contingency plans that can serve as approval. So this is very helpful for RPEL and other organizations to see where the focus of future work and collaboration may be. Now I'll speak briefly about operational consideration. That's different from regulatory. This is not something that we want regulators to do. This is specifically for operators to make sure that we do have sufficient stockpiles. It doesn't have to be in country, but if you're bringing it from outside, we need to make sure that it's available and can be brought in expeditiously. We need to make sure that both stockpiles and equipment is available. And as I mentioned, if a country requires NIBA-SIMA, not only we need to prepare one, but also we need to work with regulators to make sure that they know what to do with it. Especially with SIMA, that is a relatively new calculation methodology, and I see some people struggle with understanding how it works and what it means. So there may be some opportunity of collaboration and education in a peacetime, so we are better prepared to respond at the time of the spill. And of course, some countries do have field monitoring requirements that may require us to bring additional equipment. And here's the summary of this analysis. We decided not color code it as we did with other, with regulatory considerations. So these tables are not confused, but also it's a little bit harder to just assign color codes, because in case of a regulation is either there or not. It's very easy to assign colors, but for some of these questions, for example, is there in-country stockpile? Answer is yes, but this is where you need to look at volume. How much is available? Maybe it's just a couple of drums. Maybe it's not sufficient for the size of the spill that country would expect. Same thing with application techniques. There may be some application equipment for vessel application of dispersants, but this technique would only treat a relatively small volume of oil. So again, it may not be sufficient for operations to the worst case discharges that country may need to plan for. So this would be helpful for operators to, again, as initial indication, whether there are some dispersants available in country. Again, it doesn't have to be in country. It can be brought from others. You just need to make sure you have access to dispersant stockpiled globally. And we found that sometimes we believe there is dispersants, but there is no information about who owns them, how much of it, how to get access of that. So definitely some opportunities for industry to talk to each other and identify all the resources available, so then we can use them wisely if regulators deem that it's a useful response technique in certain situations. So we also noted that some countries have dispersant storage requirements, and it's not just important for that country to make sure they're stored accordingly and they can be used at the time of spill, but also if you are going to bring stockpile from elsewhere, how do the storage requirements apply to the stockpiles, because they may not have been stored or recorded with the same standards. And I already mentioned that a few countries now require net environmental benefit analysis or spill impact mitigation assessment as a formal document. So for those, it's kind of typical for industry to prepare them in advance, but it also may be prudent for a country to consider having these kind of workshops on benefits and drawbacks of dispersants to do it beforehand and on a regional basis. This is kind of what was done in the United States, because it was recognized you cannot do it for every platform, and regulators don't want to see this many reports, because for the same area offshore, the answer will be the same. So sometimes it is helpful to have regional workshops and assess area as a whole and make decisions kind of in advance and prepare this information in advance, so you are not delayed or don't have to deal with multiple different reports that may have conflicting information. So again, timing is the key, and collaboration and preparing information prior to the spill is the key for success. And we also highlighted a few of these countries that require additional monitoring equipment, which industry has access to, but again, has to maybe discuss with country how quickly we can bring them through customs. I mentioned that we gathered a lot of details that would not be possible to just summarize in a couple of tables that I showed you. And that's why in the report, you will be able to see country profiles in addition to the tables that I showed you. And this is how they look like. It's just 2 pages summarizing information that we have so far about type of regulations with internet links to relevant documents when they're available. We will highlight which dispersants are approved, and you can follow the links to confirm that information, and it will change over time, so we will keep it updated. We also will talk about authorization process for the time of the spill, and how it's our understanding this will progress on the day of the response. And we also mentioned what we know about availability of resources in country, dispersant stockpiles, planes, and so on. So I encourage you to have a look, especially for the countries you work in, and let us know if there is anything that you would like us to update. So in the summary, this report identified some of the critical aspects that we believe are important for efficient regulation and operations to respond to spill the best we can. We also identified some improvement opportunities and collaboration opportunities that would allow us to share information and improve preparedness in response in many countries. And we will update this report in 2026 by including data for Caribbean countries that we didn't have at the moment, but we wanted to get this report to you so we can already start actioning some of these items. And now the important part, here you can see a QR code and the link for the report in English and Spanish. And we hope that this report will promote the discussion, cooperation, and sharing of best practices among all stakeholders interested in this topic. And ARPEL will definitely be delighted to support all of these initiatives. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time. And we have about 15 minutes left for questions and answers. And I guess, Miguel, you're going to let me know if we got any interesting questions, and I will do the best to answer them.
Thank you, Victoria. Excellent presentation. I have included in the chat already these URL addresses, the links to our ARPEL website, where you can find in Spanish and English the 2 documents that Victoria was just mentioning. I have also received some questions in the chat asking about if this was going to be recorded or if it was going to be shared with the participants. The answer is yes, this has been recorded, and I am posting in the chat box as well the links. There are 3 possible links where you can find the recording of the webinar when it's ready, which will probably be before the end of this week. Okay, you can either go to Arpel YouTube channel. Okay, Victoria, you can stop sharing your screen, please.
Oh,
And okay, and you can either go to YouTube or have it in the Arpel website in the event courses and events. Okay, so that being said, please check the chat. You can find all the information there. Just copy and paste that for future use, and let's concentrate on the questions here. I've seen some of them, but I want to concentrate in those that we can really answer. Some are requiring a specific amount of dispersants to be used, something that we will not be addressing here. This question saying for cases like Mexico, relying on the list of dispersants tested and pre-approved, if from January 26, this list will change and only 3 will be listed, but not available in high volumes, what should these countries do besides monitoring the process in the USA? Should they look at these persons tested and available in other countries or areas like Europe?
yeah, this is a very important question and definitely a very pressing topic for Mexico, considering there's only half a year left to make a decision if they want these persons to be used going forward. They could consider accepting these persons from other countries like UK and France. That's a pretty common practice. And that will ensure that they have access to the global dispersant stockpile. They could also consider approving additional dispersants. I believe they had approved dispersants from global dispersant stockpile in the past, so they may have this information, but they do have these options to either test and accept more dispersants, maybe previously approved dispersants, or trust other countries and allow rely on their because it's often that countries pick 2 countries saying I will approve dispersants that are accepted in UK and in France, to prevent the situation that if one country for some reason expire all of their listing, then you still have something to go by.
Thank you, Victoria. We have another question here. One person is asking if we are handling information about the use of dispersants in Venezuela. We tried to get that information, but we have not. So there is an anonymous attendee, the person asking this, if he or she can have access to accurate information, please contact me. I will put my email address there, and we'll try to share the questionnaire, right? If we have if we can have accurate information. Of course, it's a very important country, but we could not find that information, unfortunately. Victoria, we have another question, says Dr. Roge, considering the importance of oil-specific compatibility, are operators or transporters encouraged to pre-test dispersants on their crude types? And are there examples of countries with predefined final response dispersants to bring this to accelerate decisions during a spill, given how critical timing is?
This is an excellent question, and I'm glad that it was asked because it's a common, not misunderstanding, it's a common issue that people want to know about. And when I am asked what would be the best dispersant for this particular oil spill, I always say it's the one that you can get here faster and in sufficient quantities. Because in the laboratory, yes, we can see some minor differences between different dispersants on different oils. But in the field, when oil changing properties so fast, it transitions from light crude to very viscous emulsion so quickly that if you try to attempt to match dispersant to a precise oil composition, you will fail in a successful response. So there are only few kind of extreme cases for Arctic or for very, very viscous oils that some dispersants are slightly better, and we can have a separate webinar about that. But I would say that especially for 3 dispersants that are stockpiled in OSRL, Global Dispersant Stockpile, they are all very well studied, understood, tried in the field, and they have reasonable comparable effectiveness in for oils. We do see maybe some dispersants new formula now that in a laboratory may be slightly more effective, but I would not really kind of hang my hat on that. I would absolutely recommend to use very well-known dispersants, not something new and exotic that we don't know anything about, and rely on existing 3 main dispersants that are being used and bring it quickly to the site. That will ensure best success of your operations.
Great. Yeah, this is really important. And we have another interesting question here because I think it relates to the spirit of the work that we are presenting regarding regional cooperation in Americas. And of course, this is worldwide, but let's talk about shared risk. The question is the following: how is a spill managed in accordance with national regulations when it occurs across the maritime borders of 2 or more countries? What regulations are applied? If the dispersion plume crosses into another country's territory, which country is responsible and under which regulatory framework should the response be conducted? I think this is very relevant to the work we are doing. Victoria.
Absolutely, and it shows the importance of interaction between governments and not treating this topic in a silo, and our PEL role in promoting these discussions, because ocean doesn't respect boundaries, fish moves across boundaries, and oil spills move across boundaries. And at the moment, all these dispersant regulations apply to the country waters, and it may change. So one day while a spill is in one country, it may be we can use dispersants, maybe not use dispersants, but then it moves to another country waters and the regulation there is completely different. So this neighboring country definitely needs to understand what the regulations are and what are predominant direction of oil spill. I believe in Suriname, Guyana area, in that region, oil is moving towards Caribbean more so than towards the shore. So a spill in one country can very quickly affect many other countries and potentially go all the way to Caribbean. So if I was a Caribbean country, I would be very interested what dispersants policy all these other countries have, because if they cannot disperse oil quickly and let it biodegrade naturally in water, then my country is going to be impacted by this spill unnecessarily. So this collaboration between countries is very important because we all live in the same environment and we should provide best spill response we can, regardless of local regulations.
Thank you, Victoria. And I think that's part of the work we do in our PEL as well. The idea is not that everyone does the same, but rather have a certain harmonization. Of course, the prerogative of developing the regulations is from the governments, right? But this work that we are presenting and the report that you will read carefully is a good way to encourage this type of integration and harmonization, which doesn't mean that everyone does exactly the same, of course. Okay. There's another question here says, if production of more volume of certain products can take up to 60 days, the oil industry is in risk of not having a good tool for response. It would be good to have coordination to have them produce more quickly. Maybe some pre-purchase orders, so manufacturers know that at some point they will be requested to sell their product. Those are the questions.
Yeah, this is a topic that we looked in details and struggled for years. The issue is that we as industry, we cannot control manufacturers. And these manufacturers make chemicals for different purposes. But what's most important is that they rely on certain ingredients that they don't make, they buy from Johnson & Johnson's, but these are the same ingredients that go into shampoos, for example. So all these surfactants are assigned in advance for many years ahead. And it's impossible to come to this company that's been selling to Johnson & Johnson for years and say, stop that contract, give me all your surfactants because I have a spill response. This is a different industry that we cannot control. And what we found is that because of the dynamic of the world, different ingredients are available or not available at different times. So it's not like you can stockpile one ingredient and then produce it quicker. It's just nature of the world that there may be shortage of one or the other, and different manufacturers kind of rely on different suppliers, so we cannot control them. What we can control is to be able to evaluate which dispersants we have in a global dispersant stockpile globally and make sure we can access those stockpiles. And there are considerable stockpiles available, and we can make sure that we can bring them in quickly. And while we are using the stockpile, we can ramp up manufacturing and production of more dispersant, and then we will be better prepared. So it's just a reality we need to be aware of, and this is why it's important to understand which dispersants are approved and making sure these are available from existing stockpile and don't expire them quickly, and we can continue testing them. Dispersants can last for decades. We have corrected dispersant that is 40 years old and was sitting on Alaska, and it's still working. So we may need to rely on existing stockpiles and talk with manufacturers how they can expedite this process, but it may be a challenge.
Victoria, thank you. We have time for one more question. There have been a couple of questions related to the use of dispersants in rivers. In the survey, the original survey with 50 questions that you mentioned, requested that, and most of the countries said no to the use of dispersants in rivers, those who have a policy. Okay, so
I'd like to add to this that the reason why they said no is typically we do not recommend dispersants used in river for a couple of reasons. Although there are freshwater dispersants available that could be effective, but the question is, do you want to put oil into water? And in a river, there is potentially not enough depth, and there is a lot of turbulence and mixing with sediment. So this is type of environment you may not achieve the dilution and biodegradation that you can achieve in offshore environment, and it may cause potentially more impact than the oil itself. Also, in the rivers, we often have resources at risk like water intakes, and you don't want to disperse oil and push it into water intakes. That's not an issue for offshore environment. That's why typically dispersants are used for marine situations.
Thank you. I will move to this last question because it refers to the work we do as well, and it's very relevant. The person has downloaded the report, and as you mentioned, it's not the Caribbean countries are not there, apart from Venezuela, which is South American, right? And the person says that an oil spill from a tanker can occur anywhere, even in locations with no oil operations. Right, they are the ones affected. Yeah. They transfer the risk from producer or transporters to countries that are not using that. So the question is, well, it's not very nicely written, something happened, but is there a potential for ARPEL to promote the discussion and exchange of knowledge, include countries that are not currently in the report and thinking of the Caribbean?
Yes, that's a very important question, because what we find that in countries with oil operations, when industry comes in, they bring all this international knowledge and best practices from other countries they operate in. But without this, some of the Caribbean countries may not have interest as much in oil spill response, or don't see the need to prepare, and they may also not have resources like the other countries. So it's definitely important to prepare best practice documents and share it across the region, because those smaller countries also may have a spill from pipeline or from tanker, and they are going to be the most vulnerable, because while oil companies drilling offshore also have a lot of resources and expertise and knowledge available, they may do maybe better response. But if it's some very small company that goes bankrupt the next day and doesn't have all the access and subscription to global services, or if it's a small country with a tanker situation, they may be more challenged. So it's absolutely the need to share best practices with them and make sure they're also prepared. And it also reflects on the question, which dispersant is better? We carry so many products in all these countries that it's impossible to have different dispersants for each of the products that we carry. So we have to make sure they're effective on all of them, and we have access to global dispersant stockpiles.
I think with that, we are reaching exactly 1 hour of this webinar. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Victoria, so much for the excellent presentation. I'm sure that everyone in the oil spill community will be hearing from this report, the outcomes and new additions, and from Victoria as well. We are counting with everyone to continue this process for the next steps that we were just talking about in the last question, particularly. So thank you, everyone. And please check the chat before you leave. Remember, there you have the links to download the reports and where you can find the recording of this before the end of the week, or probably Monday if you want to wait. So thank you, Victoria. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.